Conversations across time. 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 Conversations across time.
Good evening, and this is the second half of a conversation that most of you heard last week. This is Conversations Across Time. Our guest tonight, former State Representative Babette Josephs, who is co-host. Seated next to Babette Josephs is Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes. Seated next to Justice Holmes is Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Welcome. And seated next to Elizabeth Barrett Browning is Tupac Shakur. Now, last week, we were having a discussion, and it was very heated because we were trying to establish some understanding in terms of how you, Ms. Browning, and you, Mr. Shakur, both being poets and both having such similarities in terms of your idea of using your art as critique, as social commentary on governmental policies. The similarities between you two were striking to Babette and to me, and actually to Justice Holmes. And Justice Holmes, we were beginning to ask you some questions about some of the decisions that you rendered. But I believe first that for benefit of our audience, this is a controversial show, and I believe Ms. Browning was feeling, as the kids say, some kind of way. So what we're going to do is just take a moment to address that. And that is to say that what we strive for in this show is to have controversy, and looking back on the lives of both you and Mr. Shakur, we are able to see more similarities than differences. I think it's important now for us to get to some policy decisions, and certainly some policies that were led to by some decisions that Justice Holmes made. So let us take a moment and look at that and consider how the two of you would feel, and how you do feel as poets, as artists, as social commentary on the decisions that Justice Holmes rendered in the Shenick case. And that was a case in 1917 having to do with the decision that you wrote, Mr. Holmes, and I think I'd like to quote that language, is that you said Congress, and you always deferred to Congress, had the power to forbid the publication of speeches and leaflets that interfered with the draft. Now, here we're talking about World War I. What's so interesting to Babette and I, having lived through the Vietnam era and protest about the draft, is that you thought that the idea that one would be distributing leaflets that was against the draft. I don't know how you reached that conclusion, in that we are certain, as anti-war protesters ourselves, that there's always going to be that element of the population that keeps us focused on what's really occurring with wars. So I'd like to hear your justification for the abrogating free speech.
First of all, you forgot to mention, Ms. Crawford, that there was a law passed by Congress called the Espionage Act.
I'm so sorry, you're correct.
And by passing out that literature that told young men not to sign up for the draft was a direct violation of the Espionage Act. I did not say that they could not pass out literature if there hadn't been any act of Congress forbidding it. But I did say that in a time of war, Congress had the right to pass an act to protect the general welfare, and by passing out leaflets telling young men not to serve in our military, it represented, as you said, a clear and present danger.
No, you said that.
Well, yes, she quoted me. You're right.
So
just let me finish 1 second. So if Congress had not passed the act, and Mr. Shenick, it was right in this area, in fact, had been passing out that literature, I would have defended his right under the First Amendment. But because of the Espionage Act and the war, it became a clear and present danger. 4 months later, another case came up called the Abrams case, which the court upheld the conviction of a man passing out communist literature, and I dissented because it didn't violate the Espionage Act, in my opinion, and it didn't represent a clear and present danger.
So then, what about these leaflets that they were passing out, telling these young men not to enlist, not to show up for the draft, not to enlist, not to join the war effort, all the things they were telling them not to do? You saying that them not joining presented a clear and present danger?
If every man did followed that, I don't know
So
how
what about the
persuasive,
clear and
then there
present
wouldn't be
danger
an
to the
army.
people? What about the clear and present danger to the young men who were signing up to get shot?
That's their job, I suppose he thought.
Now, that's perfect, because that's what I was hoping somebody would say. Now we can explain why me and Elizabeth Barrett Browning are not the same. You're a wonderful poet, okay? That's great, and I admire your work. I think it's beautiful. Your way with words and the elegance with which you craft your phrases is spectacular. But that's not what we're here to talk about right now. What I'm trying to explain, and hopefully someone will hear me, is not that we're horrible people or that we're completely different or that we're never the same. I recognize that there are some things about us that's the same. But you know what ain't the same? Here's the difference right here. Now you got one man holding a gun. He's pointing it at another man. Okay? Mm-hmm. Now, the man holding the gun is clearly not the same as the man who the gun is pointed at. Now you have a third person on the side saying, oh man, don't do it, don't do it, don't shoot him, he deserves to live, he ain't do it, it wasn't him. Now, that third man, you could say he's doing the right thing. Okay, but what you can't say is that third man is the same as the man who got the gun pointed at him. That ain't the same. And that's all I'm trying to explain. It's not that we disagree, we just in different positions.
But the third person didn't have to say anything. I want to go back to...
So what, you want, a cookie?
I want to go back to what the Justice wrote, which says to me that if Congress passed a law that said, you can't make any political speech, you can't say anything about this war, then would you say that Congress could legislate away the First Amendment? That's what it sounds like to me you're saying.
If it represented a clear and present danger, and if our society evolved in that, and I'd like to point out that Ms. Crawford pointed out about the war protest over Vietnam in the 60s and the 70s. Well, I want you to know that the government was going to use the Espionage Act and my ruling to put some of those anti-war protesters in jail and using the same ruling. So what we're saying is, what is more important? And this is the age-old law and philosophical question: security or freedom? And where do we draw in the law?
Maybe what we're saying is, what's more important, the First Amendment to the United States Constitution or some bill that's passed by Congress or a state legislature?
It's not absolute. The First Amendment was never intended to be absolute. It's not absolute.
It's a shame, I know that, and I'm always sad about it.
But the interesting thing about that is the First Amendment, the notion of it, has to do with the protection of political speech. And I do not understand how you make the difference between Mr. Shenick saying being anti the war,
being anti the draft,
being anti the draft, and how is that not political speech as protected
if
under the
Mr.
First
Shenick
Amendment?
had simply said the war is wrong, or he thought the United States was in error in entering into the war, or that the war was a conspiracy among capitalists, he would have
Which
the
it was. I'm so glad you admitted that. Yes.
But he would have the right to say it. But he does not have the right
Justice
to
Holmes
tell
said that.
young men not to join the military
How do you
because.
distinguish?
Well, he can
If you
express
say
he can
this-
express his opinion against the
say
war
this-
without saying don't join
This
the army,
war is
but violate.
wrong, but go fight. That doesn't make any sense.
And see,
Well,
this
that's
right
an
here, this
individ-
is why, see, what y'all are doing right now, this is, again, why none of this is actually real, right? None of this is real because what you're doing right now is you're arguing, ultimately, you're just arguing semantics in a room safe, far away from anyone who's actually going to have to deal with the consequences.
I want to say this, Mr. Shakur, because this is the reason that we have this discussion with Justice Holmes. Because semantics is what
Counts.
the Supreme Court, that's what they do. They slice, dice, mince, chop, and whatever to
And it
reach the
takes us
conclusion
into
that
a-
they want to reach.
But
And
you
it
put,
takes
but-
us into a future which is shaped this way or this way or this
And-
way
and in
or
fact-
that way.
And it's happening today. It is happening today with the Supreme Court. And, you know, you've got some justices that actually, I believe they worship at the shrine of Oliver Wendell Holmes.
But they don't even, I understand what you're saying, and I recognize that part of shaking out laws is recognizing the importance of semantics and clarifying positions. I get that. I understand you're a jurist is what you do, okay? That's cool, but what we're separating ourselves from, which ultimately is the thing that matters, and I think even Justice Holmes would agree that this is the thing that ultimately matters, is what is the net result, okay?
No.
So wait a minute. So if you look at
That's
that,
the first thing you said I agreed with.
well, so if you look at that, right? Then if you look at that one thing, then ultimately what Justice Holmes is saying with those opinions, which he obviously wrote about, is
800 more.
that the difference in these two situations is not the action, but the potential result. Now, I'm not saying I'm trying to justify it, but it's very clear.
But I want to say something to you because Justice Holmes, one of the things that's so interesting, you represent a class. I was appalled that young people are taught in school to revere Oliver Wendell Holmes, this great jurist. And this great jurist, you were an elitist, you believed in capitalism, and you actually supported the oligarchy that we are now a part of, because that's what's going on.
Well, he said Congress could curtail the Constitution by passing legislation.
If it's a clear and present danger.
But
I don't agree. I think that's that is what the clear and present danger is.
and you know
That
something
people's
else?
political speech should
Let me
be
give you a
truncated.
quick
No,
hypothetical.
I'm going to ask, and you'll hold that for one moment. We have to take a break. But when we come back, I would like to hear your hypothetical on this issue, because right now we are living under the onus of two Supreme Court decisions, Citizens United and McCutcheon, which means that money equals free speech. And I'd just like to know how you justify the positions that you took, because it seems to have led to where we are now with this recalcitrant Supreme Court that is now sitting. So we'll be back, and when we come back, Justice Holmes will have an opportunity to defend his position. Please come back. Thank you. Welcome back. Before the break, Justice Holmes was about to give us a hypothetical, and we'd like to hear that.
All right, to Ms. Crawford and Ms. Josephs, suppose as a newspaper reporter, you had the United States plans for an invasion. Let's just say it were D-Day Normandy. Would you publish those plans even if you knew that that would affect the invasion and cause millions of young men to lose their lives?
That's not really the question. I think the question is, if I publish them, would I get punished, or would I be allowed to do
Yeah,
that
should you be
under the
punished?
First
Yeah,
Amendment?
right. Should you be allowed to do it under the First Amendment, and should you
really,
be punished?
I kind of believe in an absolutist First Amendment.
Well, that's where we differ.
I think it's really worth it.
So in other words, 1 million young men could die for the defense of freedom of the press. And if we leaked all the things like Snowden did, that's
Like
perfect.
WikiLeaks, like
yeah,
Snowden,
that's
like-
perfectly all right.
See what you see now we doing it again, and this is exactly how this is the shit that I be talking about in our society. Okay, so look, so basically, you high horsing right now, you grandstanding trying to say that if you believe in absolute free speech, then you believe that all these hundreds of thousands of young men who didn't really want to be there dying anyway, they should just die because you get to say what you want to say. But you just said that though, and you know if you say that out loud again one more time and then say it inside your head and then say it out loud again, you know that shit is crazy. You know it is. Because so I get to say whatever I want to say. That's the core of clear and present danger. So now let's be real though. Let's be real. Because see, this is why now I'm gonna bring this shit all the way back. This is gonna fuck y'all up. So look. So this is exactly how this shit works. This is the real version. All right. So the reality that we all face is we have these decisions, and they're all ugly decisions. But the decisions are ugly because the people who put us in the position weren't thinking about the decisions that we would ultimately have to face. See, this is why. But
my point.
I'm making your point and destroying it at the same time because neither version is pure.
If we had a real First Amendment, I don't know that we would be in a war where people's plans could be leaked that way.
But none of this shit is real. That's what I'm trying to. This is
what it's real.
Are you talking about?
It's real in its impact.
The impact of everything is real, but the First Amendment ain't real. The whole Constitution ain't real. It's on paper. In fact, if you go back and look at Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes' decisions, it's very clear that even this celebrated American jurist, American jurist recognized that the Constitution was a sketch. This shit ain't real. It's a sketch. Now can you use it?
It's a real sketch.
It exists on paper, but it's not.
It's a real sketch.
These are not the laws of men. But these are not the laws of men in real life.
I guess what I need to do.
It's an evolving document. It's exactly right.
Life is an evolving document.
Because what I need to do is I feel that it is insulting to the citizenry to say that the First Amendment is not real. Because if the First Amendment is not real, then what are we doing?
Now, hold up. Be a real nigga right now. You know the First Amendment ain't never been real.
Okay.
You know it hasn't.
Absolute, but it's real.
We're
We're sitting here saying all kinds of stuff that wouldn't be allowed in countries that don't have a First Amendment.
And this is the other thing. We're sitting here talking to a Supreme Court jurist. We're sitting here talking about, and I'm going to call them out, we're sitting here talking about Scalia and Thomas.
Yes.
We're sitting here talking about them. And if the First Amendment were not real, would we be able to do that? And so
I don't think so.
And I respect you, Mr. Shakur. I respect your rage, but this is the one thing that I have to say, that we would not be allowed to have this conversation if we were in Russia. We just wouldn't be able to do it.
But let's go back to what you just said 3 seconds ago, which is we wouldn't be allowed. Here's what you're forgetting. We are allowed to sit here and have this discussion.
Yes.
We're not free, which is why I'm trying to explain to you that the First Amendment ain't real. It's not. We not free.
The First Amendment does not answer every question. The First Amendment is not an elixir. The First Amendment is not a magical spell.
And it's not absolute.
The First Amendment is the First Amendment.
Magical spells would be more real than the First Amendment.
It's not absolute.
Now we got to the metaphysical, which is something that I'm sure Ms. Browning would like to jump in here on this. Yes.
Indeed. I'd like to address a few things, if I might, without being interrupted by you. I respect your zeal. I respect your rebellion. I respect the fact that you have a voice. And from what I've read, I respect what your voice has spoken to me. And that's where I began at this table with you. What I'd like to say now is simply this. There comes a time when you have to pull back and realize that we're not all so different. You want that difference. You're a segregist.
I don't want a difference. I
You
bleed the
claimed,
difference.
then that is your need, sir. That is not my need.
How I need to die? Explain to me how I feel
How
a
I
need to die.
be an invalid.
May I ask this question? When you say how do you need to die, are you referring to the dissension against the First World War? Is that what you're referring to? How I need to die?
I don't even need to qualify that. The very fact that you would even ask the question suggests to me that you're not being for real right now. Let me explain what I mean when I say, how do I need to die?
I didn't say that you were not being for real.
No.
Those words never came out of my mouth.
It's not about that. It's not.
Nothing is ever about anything except your opinion.
These ain't
And I
opinions. These ain't opinions. These is facts. These is
They
facts.
are your facts,
We not
sir.
the same. Okay, so how you gonna? You just said
You're the one
I
who-
need to be different. How I need to be different? I was born black.
You chose.
She was born a woman.
I
in
chose
an
to be
era
born black.
Oh, hush.
when women had no rights, really, basically, even white women. So
The point is, sir, is that you are an antagonist, and that can be a wonderful thing in this world, especially when it comes to someone like the justice.
Who am I
But
antagonizing?
You are antagonizing
who
all
seems
of
to
us.
believe, however, that if Congress legislated away the First Amendment, or God forbid the Second Amendment having to do with guns, then they could do that. That's what you're saying.
If it
Is it
evolved,
not?
if it evolved a clear and present danger, and it was the will of the people, it's not absolute. You can go through the history of the First Amendment.
So you think what Congress does is the will of the people? How
I
about
want to ask
state
you something. When you talk about
legislators?
Well, now you're getting, Ms. Joseph, you're getting into a different question when you say what Congress does is the will of the people.
I
You're
thought
getting
that's what you said. I
no,
take it
no.
back.
I said it should be the will of the people. If you're talking about Congress 100 years ago or Congress now, maybe today's Congress isn't the will of the people. Maybe society changed, and maybe if I looked at certain
isn't that
cases
something-
now, I would look at them differently. However, I still insist on a clear and present danger. And there's an old saying: "Your right to throw a punch at me stops where my nose starts." So there's no absolutes.
But I want to say this. When we talk about Congress, we talk about clear and present danger. And I'm not, I wanted to get us to the point that we were talking about citizens and we were talking about McCutcheon, and for the audience's understanding, citizens is the case decided by the Supreme Court, which essentially stands for the fact that money equals free speech.
But that's always been true. How is that new? Why are we even
It's
talking about
codified
that?
now. This decision codifies something. It's always been
It
true.
made a big difference. It made a
It's
big
made a
difference
difference.
in the way campaigns are conducted.
Ms.
Absolutely.
Joseph, but
It's made a difference in the way they're conducted, but it hasn't changed the results.
Ms. Joseph,
Yes,
you're
it does.
the
I think it
absolutist on the First Amendment, and if I interpret the Citizens United decision, Scalia and Kennedy were also absolutists on the First Amendment. So you can't be an absolutist on the First Amendment when it comes to protest against the war, and then balk when they rule against you, when they say corporations have free speech just like you do. So I'm not an absolutist on the First Amendment. I said that when there's a clear and present danger and the will of people recognize that, we can legislate against it. If I were alive today, I would have supported McCain-Feingold. See, because I believe in
Because
limits on the
Congress
First,
has that.
right, and I believe in limits on the First Amendment, but on the one hand, you're an absolutist, and then when the current court rules absolutely on the First Amendment, you balk at the
Wait, I
ruling
haven't
on
said a word
citizens and
about it,
not.
but that's okay.
Well-
I take her. You assume something, but that's fine.
Yes, because I believe that the First Amendment pertains to citizens, pertains to individuals. I think that this notion that it pertains to corporations, it's what's troubling. I think that, how does a board get to make a decision and pump whatever money they want into
And
getting
how
a
does
specific
money
result.
equal
but
speech?
even
And
if
how
we,
does money equal speech?
but even if we accept your argument that corporations aren't individuals, there have been limits on individual campaign contributions.
Yes, which
and
you have left.
and that there also, that's free speech as well, and speech
If
is
you believe that
I-
money is speech.
Well,
well,
wait a
you
minute.
could say that, then, but you can then, if you want to take it in current parlance, it would be advertising. Maybe you would not let somebody advertise something if they wanted to pay for a commercial. There's limits on that. There's a million different limits on speech.
But I want to say this when you talk about individuals, because we cannot not have some mention of the McCutcheon decision, which stands for the proposition that, and this is the First Amendment argument Chief Justice Roberts advanced, that the core of the First Amendment was to protect political speech, and that from political interference, from governmental interference, even if the people might welcome it. So there was a time when, according to the election rules, you had to disclose where the money was coming from, who was paying for the ads.
Still some groups have to, just not all groups.
Not all groups, but McCutcheon stands for that there's an inordinate amount of money that can come into a political campaign, which means that I'm not as equal as you. Because if I don't have the same amount of money and the resources that you have, your free speech means more than my free speech. I think at some point there's something lost in that, and I think, Justice Holmes, I somehow believe that you led us down this precipitous path. I hear you saying that
I
you
think if
support
the
McCain
Supreme
Feingold.
Court today had followed my precedents, they would have ruled
In favor of the
in favor of McCain-Feingold and in favor of Congress's right to limit contributions, because there's no absolutes.
They didn't change the contribution limits. They only changed the fact that certain corporations, which are not newspapers or television stations, radios, whatever, can do the kind of thing that newspapers do. That they can make recommendations, they can talk about issues, they can even support, I suppose, candidates, so long as the candidates
I
are.
believe in free speech. I believe in the exercise of ideas in the marketplace, but there have to be limits on it, and it cannot represent a clear and present danger.
See, here we go with the danger again. But see, here's what you got to understand. You're talking about this recent ruling with McCutcheon and all of that. You talking about it as though you think it's a bad thing, which I understand why on the surface it's bad. Okay, I get that. But again, once you actually look at the impact, to me, I don't really know. Like, I'm not sure it's bad because now we actually telling the truth. See, if you really look at it, this money has always been speech. Well, let me ask you this: when was the last time you heard of a revolution that didn't get financed?
Well,
Okay,
right.
so money, so therefore it's not new, right? So if we recognize that money is speech and that money is what ultimately makes these decisions, now at least we can be real about it. Now what remains to be seen is what's going to happen. Will people actually recognize the fact that, okay, so you got this set of people who are clearly openly using their money to make decisions? I feel like we are actually closer to revolution than we've been in the last, probably in the last 40 years.
It might be.
And we really may very well be there. Here's what we need to do, though. We need to take a break. We need to come back next week. I mean, this is unusual that I would invite a panel back for the third time, but I think that we're just beginning to scratch the surface of some very important issues. We do look forward to you coming back and participating in a most interesting conversation with some of the most interesting people that have ever graced the face of this earth. And thank you so much.
Conversations across time, 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 conversations across time. 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 Across time. Conversations across time. Conversations across